Today, presenting on the webinar today is myself, Michael Salai. I am a partner at BPM, and I run the Managed IT service business. Managed IT is outsourced IT department for small, medium-sized businesses, supporting organizations small as 5 people all the way up to a few hundred, from help desk services to project work to pretty much anything technology driven. I also want to introduce Jill Pappenheimer. Jill, do you want to say a little about yourself?
Sure, thank you. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the webinar today. I hope you all are well. We have an interesting group of attendees. I just looked at the list, and we've got people from all different roles and responsibilities. So this will be a fun webinar, and we'll try to address from all levels so that hopefully we're not going to be too technical or not enough. So I'm Jill Pappenheimer. I lead the HR consulting group at BPM, and we support organizations, small, medium, and large, all industries in their HR function. And that can be a complete outsource or consulting on various aspects, whether it's compensation, management development, employee relations issues, conflicts, and then a lot of work around systems, and which is what we're obviously going to talk about today. We do implementations of HR systems. We do optimization. So if you already have a system, how to optimize it, or doing PEO transitions. So helping organizations really engage on that HR system that's the best, most streamlined, most efficient to support the operation. And Robert Yonker is on our team as well, and is our master of all HR systems, and I'll let him introduce himself.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our webinar. My name is Robert Yonker, and I'm an HR systems consultant here with BPM, mainly focused on HRIS implementations and enhancements and improvements to your systems. 30 plus of my working years I have been in HR or IT, or lucky enough for those 2 roles have been combined into one of those departments, and also have worked in areas where it's been data focused with large data sets and large amounts of data to really look at. That drives me into a real passion for efficiencies and collaboration between teams. And with that, let's kick it off.
So let's talk about zero-touch deployment. And everybody's probably asking, what is zero-touch deployment? Next slide, please. So zero-touch deployment is the ability to empower HR to control the process of moving an employee through the life cycle of employment through human resource management system. Some people call it HRMS. Some people refer to as HRIS. A lot of time, this is historically light with IT, and let me kind of explain a little bit. As an employee, we'll actually go on to an example. So go to the next slide. So let's talk about an employee's life cycle through a company, and how systems send information from one system to another system to another system. Next slide, please. So, so what happens when the first steps is you're a hiring manager and you need to hire a new role. So that hiring manager goes to HR, works with HR to build out those roles, and that lives inside of your HRMS. From there, that information can be transferred to an ATS, applicant tracking system. And that can go out to the public to get the job posting, have people apply for a position. Once you've found your candidate and you've extended an offer and you've hired that person. Now the zero touch deployment really starts to kick in. And this is a process of automating IT processes and HR processes being driven from human resources. Because human resources really, they own this information. And so they start collecting that information, person's, course, first name, last name, and they set up email all within the HRIS system. And because IT has connected all of these systems, now the HR information can be pushed to the IT platform through account creation, application deployments, things of that nature. And this is all building to that first day of employment. Other automations that we'll talk about later in the presentation is the hardware assignment. So things get pushed to IT through this process of zero touch deployment that HR has kicked off. And IT has the hardware ready, and they have not even done anything to the piece of hardware because they've built the systems to talk to each other to have this process be 100% automated. So that first day of employment starting to come up, IT has shipped the machine because in this current environment, we're onboarding people remotely. The HRMS has created the account for email for all of your third-party applications that run your business. And then the employee receives that machine and they're ready for that first day, that onboarding meeting where HR will get on a video chat, which is really common this day and age, and say, okay, let's go ahead and set your IT stuff up. Turn on your computer, and IT has automated this entire process where the user just puts in their information and applications and systems automatically get deployed and set up for that employee. IT has just built the systems to do this 100% automated and not actually been involved, and allowed HR to really control and manage that entire process from beginning to end. Next slide, please. So we're going to go ahead and talk about the HRMS and how that really starts the process.
As Michael said, the Human Resource Management System, also known as Human Resource Information System, and those two terms are pretty interchangeable, is the system that supports your HR data. And it can be instrumental, game-changing for an organization to have the right system in place. And when you think through the process of implementing a system, you want to think about it in terms of the entire integration of your functioning within your department. So for example, payroll. Payroll is key function within HR. The payroll data needs to speak to the HR data. The HR data being your contact information, your hire date, it houses the benefits information, as well as maybe performance information. So I'll get into a little bit more on what's included typically in an HR system. But the payroll, I want to just say that again, should integrate with the HR and the benefits, because you want to support as much of streamlined data. And as Mike said, this is your single source of information in your HR system. So you want all of the data to be kept in one place, and you want to make sure that that information is managed in a way that it is your single source of truth. The process should also the process of defining your HR data should support your processes and your practices. And ideally, your HR system is is the tool that makes that implementation and rollout of all of those policies and practices consistently engaged throughout your organization. So as an HR function, you may define policies and practices, but then how do I make sure everybody is sticking with those and engaging in those policies and practices? By having them implemented through your HR system. So then that includes defining workflows and defining approval levels. So for example, if you have a salary increase, you can have your manager sign off on that increase in that salary. And that all becomes in your HR system. So supporting self-service data is an important component of this. You want to have a self-service component in your HR system so that employees can update their own information as opposed to passing paper back and forth. You really should not have to pass paper back and forth. And now that we're remote and in this crazy time of this pandemic, you're not going to make that feasible anyway. So this is a great time to implement a system if you don't have one, or to make sure it's optimized for your organization and your department's needs. So I already mentioned the streamline and standardizing policies and practices, but let me just mention the standardizing is another key component, because being in HR for as many years as I have, I've seen a lot of HR functions that have different departments who are creating their own policies. It's sort of like IT with having too many systems involved or too many applications that departments are implementing on their own. One way to standardize is to make sure you have a system that everybody's using within the organization that has policies and practices clearly defined and everyone's engaging in them. Centralized data, as we talked about, the single point of truth becomes key to this zero-touch deployment concept. HR becomes the keeper and has the ownership of that data. And so it has to be accurate. And if it's accurate, you also have accurate reporting. And if it's accurate, you have consistent and well-functioning IT implementations because you have one source of truth. So again, we want to avoid manual processes as much as possible. And I want to just say that again, this is a great time to implement a system if you haven't, and to create processes that are really going to support yourself as we come out of this pandemic and hopefully growth in life gets back to normal. You will have taken this time to put in best practices. Next slide. Okay, let's talk a little bit about what that system might look like for you. So there's a lot of good systems out there. You know, we support many different systems: Bamboo, ADP, Paylocity, and those systems may have various levels of support challenges or system capabilities or strengths, and it's really a decision that is based on what is the needs of your organization. But I'll say again, you want payroll to be integrated with that HR system. You don't want it as an add-on. You don't want to be doing data feeds of payroll. You don't want to be doing data feeds of benefits information. Those three components of payroll, benefits, and HR should be integrated. Beyond that, there's additional components that you may or may not need, or that can be separate to that system and maybe linked through an API. So let's just run through this. So payroll, I mentioned, time and attendance. If you have a lot of non-exempt employees or a significant amount of non-exempt employees, then you absolutely need a time and attendance. And I'm sure Robert would back me up on this in arguing, even if you have a small amount of non-exempt employees, you might want a time attendance system, because you have to track meal breaks and lunch breaks, and to do that in a way that's going to keep you from risk. Having a time attendance system will help significantly. Benefits administration, as I mentioned, there are sometimes benefits administration systems that a broker may have available that may be different than your HR system. Sometimes those can integrate pretty nicely. Ideally, if you have it as part of your main system you're implementing, that's great, but we've seen add-on systems work nicely as well. Leave management, key component, HR demographics, that you may or may not have that component in your system. Performance management, that's a big one. I highly recommend that organizations get away from those annual reviews and have ongoing conversations. Some of the big HR system players have performance management. Most of them have a module you can add on. Some have it integrated. I would highly recommend that performance management component is really looks to be the best practices these days, because it is such an important function of keeping people connected and aligned to the work that you're doing, and having that remote workforce being connected. So I wouldn't make the decision on, I'm going to take this performance module just because it's included. I would look at that function to make sure it's the best in class and meets the needs of your organization. Compensation should be a piece that is standardized, it's tracked in your HR system. And then employee engagement and surveys, there's variations on that theme as well. That could be an add-on component. It could be included in your HR system that you look to implement. The API connection is, actually I can't remember what API stands for. Robert, do you know what API stands for?
Off the top of my head, I don't, but that's a Michael. Yeah.
Do you know Michael? Oh my goodness, I'm going to put everybody on the spot here.
I think it's, you know,
application, something integration probably, but that's all right. Sorry about that. API.
Application programming interface.
Thank you. Thank you. So the API is the opportunity to connect different systems with your current system. And a programmer needs to frequently be involved. Sometimes it's an add-on. So for example, ADP may have an API that you can purchase that supports integrating another system. And the API can work really well in making sure that you're as integrated as possible, so you're not doing separate data feeds or pulling data in one way or another. And or the system could be separate and not connected and integrated with your main system. Obviously, doing an API, if you purchase, for example, a performance management tool that meets your needs, that's best in class, having it feed to your core HR data so that you're not passing back and forth when somebody leaves the organization or starts is going to be the most ideal. And it doesn't have to be a major undertaking. So again, this is a great time to streamline those processes and make those integrated connections with other apps that you're using so that you're not putting extra burden on your HR function. Applicant tracking system is also frequently the same scenario for recruiting. So you may have that integrated in your HR system, or it may be an add-on. Ideally, it's completely integrated, whether it's separate or not, so that when you have a new position that's authorized, you can then have that new hire data that feeds through to your single source of truth through your deployment.
Where is it if you're unsure? Is it your IT department? Is it your ATS, your applicant tracking system? Or could it be in your department manager's files? You do have managers I've seen in many clients that are real detail oriented, and they want to make sure they're keeping as much information that they can within their systems for their direct reports. That shouldn't be the best place for them to keep that. What should we be asking ourselves is, where should your single source of truth be? And if you think about it, all your employees are starting out as applicants. So they're coming through your ATS, which is feeding into your HRMS. So your single source of truth from our perspective really should be within HR. And in today's world, that information that's coming in, that's starting with your new hires, is going to drive everything. It's going to provide all that information that you need, that IT is going to need, that your reporting is going to need. There's many different areas that this flows out of, so we really want to focus and make sure that when it's coming in, that we're getting it as accurate and up to date and correct as possible. This is going to create that electronic employee file or the employee record in your HRMS. So how important is data integrity to your organization? We want to make sure it's consistent, and the accurate data is going to drive everything. And just a few examples of this, Jill has tapped on this first, and it's with pay. We have to be able to pay our employees, and we want to pay them accurately. That information is critical. Benefits, email, if they want to take vacations or their leaves, we need to be able to track that and track that correctly. Also, passing this information on to log into your network. Your IT department is going to need information on your organization's employees, and using it for other programs or external pieces of software outside of your organization. That information is still needed, and we need to be consistent with it. So there's two steps that we like to identify to really looking at the data that we've got coming in. And the first step is to analyze and review this data in your HRMS. Is your organization capturing the appropriate data? We want to look at that and see, because I've seen many organizations where they come in and they fill out just the bare minimum that's needed, or those fields that are identified as required, and then leave the rest blank. A lot of times it's, do we have the support to do that? Do I have the time? Do I have the staff to really fill this in? I don't know. I just need to get them paid is the biggest thought, which is a great thought. But we want to look beyond that to see what else is going to driving this. There's a lot of fields in your HRMS that are not required, but they will serve a useful purpose. Some of that is we want to identify the missing or conflicting data and then normalize it. And what I mean by that is to look at your data and make sure that we're consistent. Could be with formatting or the way that it's coming across. Good example, when your applicants are filling things out, and in today's world, they're not just doing it on a computer. It could be on a tablet or a smartphone, and it's coming across in many formats. One of them is with state. So if we don't have a drop-down field that has listed them for it, when they're entering their information, it's coming across into our HRMS. For example, you can see California as CA, or California as capital CA, or Cal, or Calif, or California. All of these are good examples, but it's going to drive your reporting and throw it off. It's going to throw filtering off. So we want to make sure that we're consistent with this. It also helps within your HRMS with your workflows and your approvals. If you're having your system and getting away from paper to change or suggest a job title change because you've done an interview with an internal employee and you're going to promote them, and you start that process, you want to be able to do that within your system so that your managers can initiate that change. It goes through a workflow and an approval process. That's all within the system. The benefits to having it in the system is, one, you're getting it away from the paper. It happens timely. but it can all be done. Notifications can be set up to those that have to approve this to go through. It's all done electronic. You can even effective date it so that if you have somebody you're promoting today and you've made that decision, that change, and it's going to happen in 2 months from now, you can effective date it for 2 months and then you're done with it. You don't have to worry about it. It will flow through on the date that it's supposed to happen. The pay that goes with it will change automatically on the date that it's supposed to happen in that correct pay date. That information can then be passed over to IT automatically. So you get a promotion, there's a job title change. IT needs to know that. And the better that we can get that information over to them, the more consistent and the more productive our systems are going to be. Step 2 is to identify your internal resources and the support that you have for them. Look within, especially in HR, to audit your data, and it should be a consistent ongoing process, not a once a year thing. I talked about this a little with the drop-down fields. So if you have an opportunity where you can fill in information in a drop-down field and populate that for people, as you have staff members coming through and rotating in and out of your departments, they're going to be doing the heavy lifting with the data entry and the auditing and the making changes. You want to limit those choices so we can be consistent. The more free-form or text fields that you have, the more opportunity that you invite for different variations of the same thing. You want to ensure that your organizational chart and your HRMS are consistent, that they're looking the same. So if you look at an org chart on paper on a desk, that when you look at your system or you report out, they're looking the same. You're not having wide variations. Some of those are with your manager roll-ups and how your managers are reporting up through their chain of command. Departments, if they're set up the same and consistent across the board, even with teams. So you may have some teams within a department that you want to break out, and this comes with the normalizing of data. Look at your fields that you have available that you're not using right now, that are system fields that they may call it, and see if there's a place where you can set up those teams in there. Some people will set it up in these system fields. Others may come in and not realize that it's there, and so they can create a custom field. So that custom field is reportable most times, but it doesn't tie into anything. And if you don't know about it, and a manager has requested something very specific just for them, when you try to roll all that up, you're going to get different information. And managers may come back and say, hey, but that's not what I got when I asked for this. So we're trying to be consistent of where we're putting the data, how we're naming it, and how we're housing it. Creating groups in your HRMS is a good way to pass on to other systems. Just remember, for us that are in HR, your data is driving everything. There's so many systems that are tied to this in this day and age, and processes, and it starts from us to go to IT, and it includes your system security, your emails, and your distribution lists. So the advantages to having accurate data, there are a few, and the biggest one within the organization is it builds trust and support within your organization for both your departments, for IT and for HR. Many a time I've always heard the excuse when something's not right, my pay's not right, my job title's not right, my start date is not right. Well, how come? Well, that's HR's fault. Or my title in my email is not correct. Well, that's IT's fault. So those are the things, those two departments, we have to work together to make this successful. And we're the two departments that most people will like to turn around and say, well, it's their fault. So we want to put in the time and look at all our information and make sure that what we have is accurate. Some other examples of this are your employment costs, your benefits costs, your tracking of hires, promotions, and separations. Turnovers is a big one, and then you can help identify problems sometimes before they happen. Good example of that is if you're looking at turnover reports and you know that your information is up to date and accurate, you may see that there is a high turnover in one single department. Then that helps you ask the question, what's going on there? Or you can dig a little deeper. Is there a pay inequity issue? Is there an employee relations issue? Is there a manager issue that we need to look at and potentially help with some coaching? Maybe they're struggling. Another good idea, another one with turnover is I've had executives come to me in their area and tell me that we've got high turnover in this one classification. And I know it's because of pay. When we pulled the data and went back, we actually looked at it and said, well, actually, you don't have high turnover. You actually have better retention than a lot of other areas in this classification. Yes, pay is something that we can look at, but that's not the driving factor. And it was really personal to them. So to them, they felt like they had this constant turnover or cycling of people coming through. And we were able to show them that it actually wasn't happening. You can also identify cost savings and some workforce efficiencies. The biggest goal that we're trying to get with this normalized and accurate data is to allow you to become a proactive and not a reactive organization. If you're ahead of the game as best that you can, you're not constantly reacting, caught on your heels. This is going to allow you to make even more improvements in your system and really work more effectively instead of harder. Next slide. And from here, we're going to take it and turn it over to Michael, who's going to talk to you about the IT side and how the data that HR has and passing over to IT is really driving his systems.
Thank you, Robert. That was a great overview about how HR can really organize all of the information in your company. An identity management system can take that HRIS information. So, like I said, once HR has organized, normalized that data, now it's IT's job to push that data from system to system. I'll use Okta. So Okta is an example. A lot of people have a legacy Active Directory, which is a Microsoft identity platform that runs on servers usually within an organization's office. And what you can do with the open API that Jill had talked about in your HRIS or HRMS is you take all of that information that HR has normalized, that single source of truth, and then you replicate it inside of the IT system. A lot of our clients use Okta. So I'm going to use an example is Okta. So Okta can be mastered by your HRMS. What it's saying is that all fields inside of Okta and about the employees is going to come from your HRMS. First name, last name, job title, department that they're part of, team that they're on, the manager that they report to, and location. This not a lot of information can drive a lot of IT processes. They can drive security groups, they can drive distribution groups, they can drive application assignments. So let me give an example. So we have Jane Smith, and we have her email defined. I'm a big proponent of standardizing people's emails, makes it easy. Her job title, she's a web producer, she's on the marketing team, or she's in the marketing department, and she's on the website team. And she reports to Jane Doe, and she's based out of the San Francisco office. So off all of this metadata for this employee, we can create distribution and security groups. So you have an organization-wide distribution group and security group. You have a marketing department security and distribution group. You have a website team distribution and security group, and also a San Francisco distribution group. So that basically has knocked out every distribution group in your email system for anyone to be able to use, which is a lot of time we see being managed manually. Like, oh, hey, I'm not on, the San Francisco distribution group. I didn't get the email about the mixer on Friday, or the virtual mixer on Friday. But also, we can use these security groups and distribution groups to not just do email and permissions, but we can also drive applications. And this is really a key part of that zero-touch deployment that this webinar is all about. It's about how to deliver applications to your employees on the first day of employment without IT's intervention. So in this example, this organization, they use G Suite across all the employees. They use Slack and they use Zoom. So IT can build around within Okta and their identity management system that these applications automatically be provisioned, and the information from the HRMS is actually flows through these systems to populate areas. So, when Jane sends an email, it says, that she's in the marketing department and who's her manager. All of that metadata is being pushed and not being have to be populated by IT. And you can start to get more granular. So she's in the marketing department, and so everybody in marketing has Salesforce. They have this fancy marketing tool called Marketo. IT's done this entire process, so they don't have to do anything. And then even more granular is that this employee is going to get Adobe Creative Cloud, Optimizely, Tray.io. A small subset of users are going to get these applications. But on day one, when that person starts on that first day, these applications are sitting there ready for that employee to use. Next slide, please. Now, a lot of time you're like, well, we do that manually, but let's talk about manual versus automated. When you have this entirely automated, you know that you only need to change this in one location. Single source of truth. Somebody gets married, they change their last name. HR handles that. The request goes into HR. And from there, HR can drive that process. And so that employee can see their last name change throughout every single system. When people
Mike, can I just interrupt there?
Sure.
Couldn't that be based on a self-service component, right? Through your HRMS. So the employee is making their change and that feeds through.
Absolutely. That is an absolutely good point, Joe. And Robert talked about promotions. Having that single source of truth, having that workflow inside of the HRMS, you get a promotion, a job title change, people that report to you now. All of this is driven because systems are moving data from the HRMS to your identity management platform, from your identity management platform to all your other systems. And most importantly, it ensures consistency. That, in a manual process, HR will make their changes. And then if you have a good manual process, a ticket will be sent over to IT to update all these systems. And then somebody from IT will actually have to manually go into each system and make sure that all of that information is changed properly. If somebody is in IT and they get a job promotion, sometimes they say IT versus information technology. And so you're starting to see in this manual process, you're seeing inconsistency across platforms versus connecting all of your systems and your platforms and having it being driven off that single source of truth. And again, this is real time. HR makes those changes and it pushes. Using those APIs, it just pushes from system to system to system to system. Next slide, please. So what do you need? We'll get in kind of the nitty gritty. And I want to remind everybody, if you have any questions, we're going to answer questions at the end of the webinar. So feel free to go ahead and ask questions within the webinar Zoom app, and then we'll get to them at the end. So let's talk about what do we need to achieve zero-touch deployment success. So first of all, we need an HRMS with an open API. Most HRMS have native connectors to either your on-premise Active Directory or your identity management provider. If your HRMS does not, there are third-party companies that can build custom SCIM integrations for your HRMS or HRMS. So I talk about an SCIM. So SCIM is a system for cross-domain identity management. Big acronym, big IT word, but it basically takes that open API and it really enhances it and automates it and pushes, easily pushes information to and from systems. It's a relatively new term. In IT, a lot of people know it, but I know that everybody on the webinar is from HR to finance to IT. And so let's talk about, there's a lot of the identity management platforms have what they call SAML, which drives a lot of single sign-on. A lot of people have talked about single sign-on, and a lot of Okta and a lot of these other identity management platforms have built-in SCIM. So this is advanced provisioning of applications. So like give you an example, where an API can't deliver a license for, let's say, Microsoft Office, an SCIM bridge can. It can say, oh, this employee's in this group, they're getting this version of Office with these feature sets, so give them this license. So the last piece that I want to talk about is mobile device management. And it's kind of the final piece to the IT side of achieving that zero-touch deployment. And I'll talk about how Apple and both Microsoft have the ability to drive IT in a mobile device management platform. Next slide. So let me talk about current environments that our customers that we've run into, and the pitfalls and manual process that we've seen in the past. So we'll talk about a legacy organization that's running an Active Directory. They have physical servers in their office, and IT actually has to take the machine brand new out of the box, spend a couple hours joining it to the domain, making sure that all the applications are on there. And organizations can do this with both Windows and Apple machines, so MacBook Pros or anything of that nature. And so this really takes a lot of effort on IT side. And if larger organizations can use technology that Microsoft's built to start to automate this process, to reduce that time to bring a workstation up to speed for a first day of employment, and through imaging and automated process, the one thing is once all this is done, it gets outdated really quickly. So you're constantly having to update this process of how you're building a machine, the software that's being installed on the machine. And so that's just one aspect. And then the other side is the user side. IT has to set up the users. They have to set up the users in all your third-party applications, be it Dropbox or Box, or other third-party tools like Slack or Zoom. And like I said, we historically see IT take to 2 to 4 hours for every new employee coming on board. Of course, through some IT automation, you can always reduce that. But we're talking about always having to have IT touch devices and processes before that first day of employment. And then I'll give you another example. We're talking about the startup. you know, kind of the organically grown IT infrastructure of a small business, where there's not a lot of high security. Employees are given machines like brand new in a box. You know, they're setting up their machines. They're going and asking for applications to be provisioned. You know, and it's just what we've seen in these type of organizations where employees won't get tools that they need to do to run their everyday job. Maybe a week, 2 weeks. I've seen up to 3 weeks, and it can kind of be a little bit of a turnoff as employees start to come on board and they're having to do a lot of their own stuff to get productive. And so with zero touch deployment, we're looking at basically eliminating all of these gotchas. You know, having a lot of work for IT up front or having a lot of work for employees having to do it on their own. Next slide, please. So kind of let's talk into MDM. So mobile device management. Mobile device management really came about organization having to secure phones. How do I secure employees' iPhones, their Android phones? And as the cloud started to, and SaaS software really started to take the norm and less software on employees' workstations, the MDM has really kind of taken over the whatever device the employee has to be able to manage these devices. Pretty much most of our customers, the norm is a laptop. Very few of our customers have desktops sitting in an office and somewhere. And especially through the pandemic, anyone that did suddenly went out and bought lots of laptops for their employees so they could work remotely. And so these MDMs have matured, and they've not just gone, they've gone past that phone. They've gone to manage that laptop. And Apple really kind of drove this through a technology, what they call a device enrollment program. And so the last piece of this whole puzzle is where, as an organization, we'll talk about Apple and then we'll talk about Microsoft, where you can buy your Macs through your company and your device enrollment program, and you can customize the onboarding experience of that employee. So literally buy a Mac, drop ship it to a customer's or employee's house. The machine's enrolled in the device enrollment program, and you have it automated to go into what you call your MDM, and you've customized exactly what needs to happen on that machine when the employee turns it on. Literally, the employee turns it on and says, "Welcome to XYZ company. Please put in your information," and it'll automatically set up the machine for you. So recently, Microsoft has embraced this in this same model, and in the Microsoft world, it's called Autopilot, where you can leverage Microsoft's cloud platform of Azure and define that you own this machine, and that when the employee receives this machine, they just have to put their employee information, and it automatically sets everything up on the workstation for you. Historically, I've seen this in large enterprise organizations, where large IT teams have put a lot of resources in to be able to customize this onboarding experience. And as Apple and Microsoft has gotten more cloud-centric, we started to see this technology really start to penetrate into smaller organizations. So now we're starting to really encourage, companies of 50, starting at like 50 employees to really embrace this as they're either starting to try to ramp up or maybe have high turnover of any of those situations. Next slide. And so really, so what are you doing with your MDM? You're defining how you want that workstation to run. So you can set up security policies, what the password, the complexity of your password, the timeout settings on your screensaver or locking of the screen, enforcing the hard drive to be encrypted. This again is all happens automatically behind the scene of the employee. And then really the ability to wipe the machine if something happens to the machine, gets lost or stolen. If you have an unplanned termination, you need to lock the machine to protect the company's information. And then you can also push software, antivirus software, VPN software. We're starting to see less software being pushed to the workstations, but in the IT side of things, these are pieces of software that are still very key to be able to, meet regulations, make sure that your information is secure. And then you can go more advanced and push out other pieces of software, Office, Adobe, any kind of specialty software. And this is where IT is designed and built the deployment package in utilizing the mobile device management to be able to deliver this stuff. Next slide, please. So final thoughts, just kind of like one last overview. Preferred setup of zero-touch deployment. It connects your company's technology systems together. And so when you connect all of these systems, it promotes collaboration between teams and employees. It breeds consistency in employee data and across all of your platforms. It empowers the HR team to own the employee's data and to run with their processes, be it promotions, moving of jobs, all of that information. And it reduces IT and HR requests. Outside of a zero-touch deployment, HR will be asked for something to update, and then IT will be asked to update. And this eliminates a lot of those requests. The requests will go straight to HR and then propagate from there. And then what we've seen when we've done this with our clients, having a clean and smooth onboarding process gives your new hires confidence and excitement that they've made the right choice. I can't count how many times I've had employees come to us saying, oh my gosh, this onboarding process was amazing. On the first day of employment, I had all my tools. My machine was running great. I didn't have to chase people around. My last company, it took me 3 weeks to get all my tools, all my software, and their managers are excited because they know that employee is going to be productive, on the first day of employment.